and welcome to another episode of Mindset Over Matter. I'm your host, Gabby Gooding, and today I'm very pleased to welcome a very special guest to our episode. Welcome, Shivani. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So, in terms of an introduction, all I'm going to say is that Shivani began as a coworker with me, but has turned into a very dear friend and a true inspiration for me over the last few years. And I'm so excited to have you join me for this conversation. Now, when people get introduced often on podcasts or videos, a lot of times, the host will go through and talk about their their role at work or what their kind of title is with their career or something like that, their accomplishments. And that's all wonderful, but I feel like in context of our topic today of talking about our authentic selves, I do feel like there's a lot more to us a lot of times than, I don't want to say just our career or just those titles, but in a way, yeah. So what I would love to have happen is if you were to introduce yourself in whatever way you would like to. So I'll pass it to you.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, I agree with you. So I will introduce myself as, I would say, I'm not going to even tell you my job title. How about that? So I am an immigrant to Canada. That was my first, I would say, my first identity. I was an Indian when I first started. Then I became a Canadian. So I have a lot of identities throughout my life. And I would say now I am just a person that's super passionate about certain things, such as wellness, always bettering yourself. And that's what I'm working on. And you've been one of integral parts of my life for that to be better, I would say. So I think if I were to introduce myself without my job title, I would say a person who's passionate about helping people, about what I'm passionate about, such, say, for example, wellness, career, just in general. And it's so hard to talk about it because every time you introduce yourself, you're going to say, hey, I'm an HR consultant. Oh, hey, I work as a manager of initiatives. Like, it's really hard. So that's why I would say trembling upon my words, because it's really hard to talk about myself without my work. So that's what I want. Yeah, I'm so excited because we're going to talk about something new. Because everyone is so focused on work, and that's half of our identity, which I don't want. I want something else. I want more than that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot with that, but I do think that it was the perfect intro because definitely we do identify as various things, right? We wear a lot of different hats in our lives. And I do think that it's, for me anyway, it was a worthwhile exercise to try to describe myself without using my job title. And I think that people don't do that enough, right? If you think about even going to a networking event or something like that, it's always, well, what do you do for work, or what's your role, or tell me about all the different roles that you got to get to the one that you're in right now. And I think as much as the person asking those questions always means well, on the other side of it, it's a little bit disheartening to think that you kind of boil down to just that. And I think perhaps it's part of just our North American culture that we're very career focused, maybe to a fault, I would say. But you're absolutely right. There are so many other parts of our lives that I think we would want to be recognized for, right? And I think that we should try to invest our time in, and we want to be known for. And I'm sure that's where people's passions come out too, when they get to talk about their hobbies, or like you said, your passion for wellness, or these other things that are outside of work. So I appreciate you trying to describe yourself without your job title, even though I think you snuck it in there at one point.
I know. I mistake stuck in there. You're right.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So if you don't mind, we'll jump right in. And for our listeners, we were hoping to talk about bringing your authentic self to work. And so, we've already kind of touched on the fact that our authentic self consists of more than just work. And so it's a really interesting sort of phenomenon to try to think about, well, okay, we have all these other parts of us outside of work, but then how do we not separate that entirely? Should we separate that entirely? A lot of workplaces nowadays, I think, are trying to market themselves as a place where you can bring your authentic self to work. And so, what does that mean? Is that really true? To what degree are we allowed to do that? Or do we feel like we're allowed to do that? So this is the topic that we were hoping to kind of explore together today, because we were talking about it even just casually, and that's not uncommon for us. I don't think we sometimes kind of dive into these conversations out of nowhere and we're thinking like, darn, I wish we'd hit record, because this would be a really good podcast episode to even listen back to ourselves later. So my first question that I would love to get your thoughts on is, what does being your authentic self mean to you?
So when we first talked about this podcast, just to be cheesy, I looked up the word authentic in a dictionary.
Nice.
And it said of undisputed origin, or genuine. And then I started thinking, how genuine, like if I were to grade myself out of 100%, how genuine am I at work? Or how authentic am I at work? And I would say maybe 60%. And it's not because someone's forcing me to be something different, but I think the corporate culture is that you have to maintain a certain level of professionalism, I would say. That's what they would call it. In a workplace, but then at certain point it almost feels like you have two faces, and after 5 p.m. we almost feel like we're exhausted because we had to put a face. And I am one of those people. I would say 60%, but still I have a very strong personality, and I call myself funny, but again, it's up to you what you want to call me. But I'm very funny and I'm very bubbly. So my personality comes out like that at work if I was working in an office. So being something else is very hard for me. Being very super professional all the time is very hard for me. And I think now that again, I didn't want to talk about my career, but I'm in a profession where it's very important not to joke about certain things. And I think you shouldn't joke about certain things in workplace anyways. But now there's another barrier now, because I'm in a certain profession where you shouldn't joke about it, because you are in that front line of your company where you're representing like human resource profession, where you don't want to look a certain way. So I would say that's my long answer, but short answer is it's very hard to be authentic. And that's why when we talked about this podcast, we said how to be authentic-ish, because there's no way you're going to be that authentic in front of your colleagues. It's very hard, unless you're like somehow you became friends with that colleague. That's different. But in front of your boss or in front of someone you're not that close to, it's going to be super difficult to talk about your personal life, or you just have to kind of disconnect from your personal life. So I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely would. And I think for me, it becomes difficult because I think that on the one hand, I absolutely agree that the standard corporate culture expects for people to leave their personal life, but also that very easily turns into personality, right? And your uniqueness at the door when you come to work, which also includes your uniqueness and all of the things that make you you. But then at the same time, they expect you, if you're going to exceed expectations or be, a high achiever or be extra valuable to them, they expect a certain uniqueness, right? They expect you to bring fresh ideas, innovation, a unique perspective, but only unique enough that fits within their boundaries of the way they do things, or the type of personality or professionalism that they expect. And so that to me becomes very challenging, because I think if I think about the last couple of roles that I've had, I feel like potentially I've had to, especially when you join a new team, I'd say it's different if you already know the people that you're working with and you can kind of tell the extent to which you'll be accepted, let's say, for your uniqueness. it's a little different. But when you first join a new team, you almost have to kind of try to sit in the background, observe, and kind of be a fly on the wall and cause the least amount of disruption and sort of learn the way that things are, and then try to figure out how you can fit yourself into that, and then somehow have to morph into a person that's then going to be unique again. And it's just a really weird, I don't know if you can relate to that, but it's a very weird kind of process of entering a new team, a new culture. I'm sure that applies if you join a new organization as well, right? You feel like, oh, I'm just going to sit back, say nothing for the first year, sometimes 2 years, 5 years, depending, if you're lucky, 6 months. And then I can be myself. But you can't just turn that on and off, being yourself, right?
Right.
And I think you said something very interesting where you said that something along the lines of, you can't be genuine or authentic because you have to be professional. Like it almost, and it feels that way. It feels like it's an either or, which I don't think it is fully, because I think that there's you can be professional and still maybe be, what I'm saying, right? Somewhat authentic, somewhat genuine. But it kind of led me to a question that I'm hoping to get your thoughts on, which is, if we think about this professional versus genuine, which parts of yourself do you feel like maybe you have to hide more in a quote unquote professional setting, or in the sort of standard corporate culture? Which parts do you think in general are less accepted or more likely to have to be hidden, I guess, to be considered professional? You mentioned your, maybe your sense of humor or your bubbliness or something. But I'm wondering if there's more to that.
It's not like I have any inappropriate jokes or anything that I'm missing out on. It's not like that. But it's hard to really, and honestly, it's not like you go to work and someone has a rule book, like you do not do this, you do not do, it's not that. But something, I don't know if you've ever had like an invisible boundary that you can't cross. And it's that.
Rules,
so
in a sense.
So it's like unwritten rules. But like, I know myself that I'm a professional, like I would never cross a line, and I know that for sure. But what I mean is like, I don't know, it's so hard to explain, because there's nothing I can think of that someone's told me, hey, like you should leave that at home. So for example, if I was okay, I have a perfect example. What if I was having a bad day?
Mm-hmm.
Am I gonna just come out flatly and say to my employer that, hey, I'm having a horrible day and I just need to like log off for the full day? I don't need to talk about it. No, I don't think that happens. I think we just end up calling in sick, and that ends up being like a physical impairment or whatever, right? Like instead of like, hey, I'm having a really tough time and I can't get out of bed today. Do you think I can say that to my manager? It's not going to be easy. So that's what I mean. Like, it's really hard to be like transparent about what's going on with you, because there's this invisible boundary, I would say. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think it's a very interesting mixture, or a very interesting line between expressing parts of your personality, which can be neutral or positive, let's say, even neutral. But then also, even if you could do that, there are always going to be days where you're not feeling yourself, or you're having a difficult day. And so it almost feels like we're getting into the territory of mental health, and, do companies actually, is the stigma really gone behind saying, hey, I'm having a bad day and I just can't focus, right? I mean, there are days, I will admit, luckily they're few and far between more recently, but there are days where I actually feel guilty for getting paid because I'm thinking to myself, I'm really not producing my best work today. I would be much better off if I could have slept in, skipped a couple of meetings in the morning, and then been more productive in the afternoon, or just call it a day at 3 o'clock because I'm really on the verge of, I don't know, crying or something. I don't know. I'm not in it. I can't focus. I'm not present. And so I really don't even feel like I I should be here, right? I'm not doing anybody any favors. And so it is a challenge when you're thinking about the sort of standard 9 to 5. But I do wonder, do you think that the ability to bring your authentic self to work is industry dependent or role dependent, or I hate to put it this way, but almost like level dependent? So if you're, a more senior leader versus more of a frontline employee, like, do you think that plays a part at all?
Absolutely. I I agree with that actually, because I started at the bank as a frontline worker, so I think it was easier to joke with customers. And again, I know I keep going back to jokes, but it's about just like, being friendly with someone and just making it easier for them to do their transaction or business, because you want them to connect to you kind of on a personal level so they can trust you, right? So I think that's why personality comes into play, because you want whoever is in front of you, you want them to kind of engage with you on like not just like a transactional level, but like on a kind of a personal level too. So there's a higher connection, I would say. But I would say, yeah, like I can't see myself once I moved into leadership, I couldn't kind of be that. I had to kind of disconnect certain aspects of my personality, I would say.
That's
And
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go
and it
ahead.
happened naturally. It wasn't, again, it's an invisible boundary, unwritten rule. No one told me to do that, but it just felt like the right way to do it is to disengage from that part of me, because I didn't want someone to take me not seriously. I'm in leadership, so I want someone to take me seriously, right? And again, no one told me to do this.
But
So
that's
just
just,
imagine,
see,
yeah,
yeah, and I completely understand that, and it is a very hard thing to try to describe, because you're right, it's an unspoken expectation to do that. And it really, it sticks with me, and it bothers me that you called it disconnecting from your personality, or something along those lines, right? Because I just I personally think that is too high of a price to pay for employment. And especially
true.
because it's not like, where does that come from? It's not written down anywhere that that's the expectation, but it kind of is. And it's interesting to me that it is, and I wonder where that comes from, because if you think about it, let's just take your example of, you worked more on the front line and then you moved into a leadership position of those same people, right? Like in the same sort of work. So, you're working on the front line, you're able to express yourself, you're able to connect with clients on a human level, and that's appreciated. And it's appreciated and it's valuable to the company to the point that they're willing to promote you to then lead others that are doing that same job.
Yeah, I
But
never
as
thought
soon
about
as
that.
that switch happens, you feel like, you know what? I can't be the person I was anymore that got me noticed and, made them think that I was valuable enough to promote. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I never thought about that, yeah, because the same people that put me in the next, like gave me that opportunity to go to the next level. But yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. But I want to share something. So in my current company, this hasn't happened. I had an interview actually when I was in the midst of changing, or I would say transitioning into a different career. I had an interview actually with it was like a aesthetics clinic or whatever. It was for like a frontline receptionist position, and it's a receptionist position, so you're thinking like it's kind of like low, like not low level. And like, how do I
Like
explain
front
it?
line
So
level, like client, like
frontline
very
level,
client facing, like first
right?
line of
Very client,
defense for the business.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and I thought it was a very simple role, and interview would be very simple. But this interview it kind of threw me off, because I never had an employer be so like, I would say that was an transparent, and not in a good way. She basically
Mm.
told me that we have a lot of women working in this clinic, and we do not appreciate when you bring personal business. So if you had a bad day with your husband, please leave it at the door. I will never, like, I will not tolerate you crying in the office, or you're having a bad, like, when we're in bad mood, the face just comes naturally. And I was told that at the interview. Do you think I want to work there?
Yeah.
So I've never had that before, where like someone's like straightforward tells you, hey, just be a robot, don't be a human. And that threw me off. Like, and I think since then I've just had like this like invisible boundary. Like no one's gonna ask me to do
Yeah.
it. And not that I'm gonna cry at work anyways, like unless again, I have to be very comfortable in that setting to cry at work. But I feel like in that situation, I was like, okay, like I never even thought about it, but
Yeah.
because this happens. So I think
That
that's
is,
next level. Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is very interesting because, it's just to play devil's advocate. I wonder why she would be so upfront about that. And it makes me think that she probably had that experience where maybe somebody was coming in and just sharing all of their drama and maybe crying at the desk, with clients in front of them. It's not a good look. I'll admit there is a certain level of,
Right.
you are representing the business and, like there should be a line, I think, between your personal life and your professional life. And I don't think that necessarily, details need to be shared or anything like that. However, it worries me that was the approach that was taken, because it also, it just shows sort of a lack of concern for you as an employee, right? Because if it were me, I think I would approach that situation more in terms of, hey, if you are having a bad day, feel free to come to me. You don't have to share details, but if you need a break, we'll make sure that we have the system in place that you can be covered for a little bit. Or if like there's a different way to go about it. And it might not make the most financial sense for the business. And what I mean by that is, yeah, maybe we need to hire an extra part-time person to decrease the workload on our people or something, and not stretch them out so thin that they're so stressed out. And maybe that's going to cost us a little bit more. Or maybe, yeah, this person's going to have to take a 10-minute unpaid or paid break, and I'm paying for those 10 minutes, but like, who cares, right? That it's a balance for sure. But I do think that it definitely doesn't make somebody feel good to be presented with a, hey, you're not allowed to be yourself. You always have to be on your A game to work here.
Right.
So, and I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, saying that, I also realized later on that it's because of the profession itself. So they are representing beauty. And crying is not a good look. Like everyone at that clinic was literally like perfect. And whether they have had surgeries or whatever, that's none of my concern. But I think it was more to do with that. They don't want someone that's in bad mood. They want someone just happy at all times and looking perfect. And that was one of the other things I noticed.
Yeah. And that opens up a whole other can of expectations of perfection and what definitions of beauty and all these things. Wow.
And let me tell you, I did, even at just entering that place, as beautiful as it was, I just knew I wouldn't fit in there. I knew that the way I am, the way I feel like, the way I look, the way my personality is, I feel like I just wouldn't be a good fit. I just knew it from the get-go. But again, you don't want to be like, okay, I'm not going to interview for the position. I needed a job. But
well, you're not going to walk in, feel the vibe, and then walk out.
Yeah.
Say, you know what? Never mind. The vibe is off here. I'm done.
Thanks.
Yeah. No, for sure. But that brings up a really good point. And I think, well, both you and I have had the pleasure of interacting with students, right, in our lifetime, whether it's, professionally or, well, I mean, yeah, even through our work, there have been opportunities to kind of volunteer and go out and do workshops and stuff for students. And we talk about, we talk about your brand, we talk about understanding your values, and we talk about the importance of finding a good fit when it comes to your values, right? So there might be people out there who appreciate the fact, this is weird for me to say because I don't identify with it, but they might appreciate the fact that they have to leave their personal life at the door, and they they don't see it as a burden to have to put on a mask to be somebody else from 9 to 5. They see it as a relief or an opportunity to be somebody else, from 9 to 5. So I think, there's no judgment on any of that. It's just, maybe somebody would thrive in that environment of beauty and perfection, and maybe that aligns with their values or their goals, whatever. But I think it's important to know what your values are, and also to choose your employment based on that. If you don't feel it's a good fit, then I think that's worth trusting, right? It's worth trusting your gut if you get that feeling.
And I can happily say that I did get the second interview and I turned it down because I don't think I wanted that.
Good.
Yeah, because
Very
as
good.
desperate I was for a job, I'm not going to put myself out there and
not be
know,
true
like,
to yourself.
yeah, exactly. So it felt really nice. Of course, I was sad that I'm not going to get the money, but I'm like, that's fine. I'll get
There's
something better.
money elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to work with someone like that. That kind of made me uncomfortable. So
interesting. Yeah. Well, good for you. I support that. That's great.
Thanks.
So, I know I'm glad that you brought this up, actually, that you had worked in a different industry before, because I know recently we spoke briefly about your experience of changing careers and perhaps how it impacted your confidence / your ability to feel like you could be your authentic self at work. So I was just going to ask, I don't know if would you mind sharing what that experience was like for you? Because I know we chatted about it the other day.
No, I don't mind. So yes, I come from a healthcare background. So my initial goal after high school, it was to be a physiotherapist, but my marks weren't high enough to get into the master. Well, not right after high school, but from university, my marks weren't high enough to get into physio. So I ended up doing the physio assistant role for like 4 years, thinking the experience would be the thing to get me in, but it didn't. So after a while, I kind of I'm going to add my personal life too, because I'm a whole person. So I got married and I had to move to a whole new city and I had to start fresh. So I took that opportunity and I quit my healthcare industry cold turkey. I had offers, but I'm like, no. I was like, I need something new. I need to start something. So that was the time that I was kind of figuring out what to do, but I still had no idea. So I applied to RBC thinking, why not? Like, I'll just try it out. I went to a couple job fairs and I didn't get it because I have no finance background. But I kept trying, and luckily I got into the frontline position that I was telling you about earlier. And I'm not gonna lie, it was pretty amazing to like experience a whole new industry, I would say. And it felt really, I don't know, kind of exhilarating, because I'm like, oh my God, I just changed my whole career. Like, and I'm doing really well. Like, I got recognized a few times, and it wasn't about the recognition anyways, but it felt really good that I chose to do this, right? So I would say my career journey has been kind of insane, I would say. But from then on, I grew personally and professionally, I would say, and the confidence wasn't there. I'm not gonna lie. I was never confidence is something I struggle with in personal and professional life. So while I was in the frontline position, and I did get appreciation from my managers, that wasn't the problem. But I think it's to do with always thinking like I'm just a frontline worker. So I don't know if I'm sure people listening to this might even have that. We always have that, like people in that office, sitting in an office, like, they know more because I don't know, they studied and they got that office and they have more knowledge. So my own theory is like I'm focusing on someone else doing their job instead of just appreciating my own. So I think my confidence struck out because of that. But in general, I feel like confidence has a lot to do with competence, which I had, but the other aspect was missing, where I kept looking at others instead of within.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you think that confidence requires competence and also an ability to kind of not compare then to others? Is that
I
kind
would
of what you're getting at?
yes, and own your own craft. Like
Mm,
you're not going to be able to do what I'm doing, and I'm not going to be able to do what you're doing unless I want to do what you're doing. That's what I'm trying to say. So even if you're
yeah.
working as frontline person or a manager or whatever the profession that you're
Mm,
in, I feel like just be there, like, and just look
mm,
within instead of just looking at someone else who's sitting in that fancy office and thinking, oh, I want to be there. And I'm not gonna lie, I was in the office after because I made it happen. But
yeah.
do you think that made me like more confident? No. Confidence comes from like inside, and that's what I'm working on now. And it's never going to be easy. It's never going to be like one day I wake up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in Miss Universe
Mm,
pageant. No, it's not going to happen. But it's like a process, right? So I think
yeah.
yes, you
Interesting.
can gain all the knowledge and be competent at what you do, but
Yeah.
I think it's still like, and that's why authenticity is so important, because you're a whole
Mm,
person. You have this work aspect, you have personal aspect. There's so many things going on within you, right? So I think this is a great
yeah.
topic.
It is a great topic. And you know what? You just said all those things you just said really hit me, like it hit home for me because
Mhm.
I, I'm not gonna lie and say that I just had this epiphany right now, but this kind of solidified it because recently I've been thinking about the fact that I haven't really been doing that enough. I haven't really been true to the things that I know are aligned with me and my interests and my strengths. And it bothers me because it makes me think back to high school me. And I don't know, I have this picture in my mind of comparing high school
Mhm.
me and my interests and the things that I was so strong at, like crushed it. I don't even want to admit this publicly, but like I would go into a comparative literature speech that I had to do in class with zero preparation, which I'm not proud of. But like I got in French and I got 100%, like on the spot, because it was
Mhm.
just something that I loved. It was something that I was so interested in. Or, I was big into theater and performing and philosophy. I loved my philosophy class. It was probably one of the only reasons I woke up in the morning to even go to school at one point. And all of these things that I was so passionate about, I
Mhm.
completely abandoned until like a few months ago, right? And you know this because we
Yep.
spoke yesterday and I said, "Hey, guess what? I joined a meetup group where we're reading philosophy books. I just bought one right here. It got delivered today. The Tibetan
That's
Book of Living
amazing.
and Dying. Nerdy maybe, but I love it. And I haven't done this since high school and I'm thinking of auditioning for a musical again because that's just like that's what lights my fire and I haven't been true to that for so long and when I think about why this is what actually inspired my previous podcast. I think it was maybe one of my first like episode 2 or something where I talked about why do we want the things that we want? Why do we pursue
Mhm.
the things that we pursue? And I always thought that it was a competence thing for me. I thought, well,
Mhm.
I can't, I'm not smart enough to understand finance, or I'm not smart enough to understand business or to work at the bank or, do all these smart people things. Right. And I
Mhm.
thought that that was the way I had to go. And I wanted to almost prove to myself that I could be competent enough to do it. But what I should have
Yes.
been proving to myself is that I can be true to the things that are actually interesting to me. Not that I don't like my job. I love it. It's great. But I would be lying if I said that there wasn't something missing. Right. And I think I've never actually had anybody present it that way. So thank you. You just give me a gift of kind of understanding that there's another part of authenticity beyond just competence. It's
And
great.
so
Sorry for the
I want to
rant, but
follow
like
up.
that was a
No,
whole
no, that
epiphany
was
for me.
great.
Yeah.
What I want to say is that even when you were telling me that, like, we talk on a personal level, but just right now, when you started talking about joining that meetup group, or you're going to do
Mm,
a audition for a musical, your face looked different. Your voice
yeah.
was different. Like, it changes. So I want, like, I think we should focus on, like, if people are listening, they should think about what is lighting them up. Because yes, it's great to have like this picture perfect role or picture perfect company that you're working for, but at the end of the day, you have to go home and you have to serve
Yeah,
the other part, right? So I feel like people should kind of reflect on what they're doing.
they should for sure. And you know, to be fair, I would say I I I don't think that I would give up what I do
Mhm.
at work to do these other things. I wouldn't, because I actually do. I that is a part of me that I love. I'm very much a strategic thinker. I am a numbers person. You know, I need that, and I think that I'm strong at that, and I feel like I
Mhm.
can do well at that. But I don't think that that's enough. And I just, I guess my fear is that I would, it would take me too long to realize that those other things are missing, and it would be too late to do anything about it. Right. So my fear is I'm going to hit a midlife crisis when I'm 55 and like 5 years from retirement, and saying, oh, you know, I never got to, I don't know, like be in another musical again. Like it's kind of,
Yeah,
I mean, I hate to say it's too late. Like, fine, sure, it's never too late. But like, you know, like there's a lot of
yeah,
years
I know what
wasted
you
there at
mean.
the same time. And so you want to be able to act on those things sooner. And if you think about all of those years where you're not really fully your authentic self, you're only your authentic-ish self, that's just not enough. And I think that you and I both
No.
agree that that I think is what fuels this feeling of there's something missing. I'm capable of more. I want more. And I don't think that it's more. I think that it's just different, or it's incomplete, right? Because I
Yeah.
also don't want it to come off as like a greedy thing, like, oh, I need to be making more money, or I need a higher title or something. It's not about that. It's absolutely not about
No.
that. It's about being true to these other parts of yourself that we're maybe suppressing or ignoring. And it makes me wonder, where does that come from? Like, why do we ignore those things? What do you think?
I think I, when you were talking about how you love what you do and you won't let go, but you want to pursue other things. Like, so you
Mhm.
want to do multiple things. I was thinking of people are not aware that they're multi passionate.
Right.
You can't just love one thing. It's not possible.
Right.
And up until like I think recently I learned that you might change your career like 10 times. It's possible.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
I I don't see being like an influencer or something, but I do like what I do to a certain extent, but I know I want more. So I think it's
Hmm.
just kind of being aware of what is lighting you up. And again, some people might just want to be an actress. Some people want to pursue be in the musical.
Hmm.
That's their only passion. That's possible, right? But I'm
Right.
saying like the people,
The
a
vast
lot of us are
majority are maybe like a combination.
absolutely. I think
They're
they're
somewhere on the
multi-passionate.
spectrum.
Like
Yeah.
you and I both have something in common. Um, we teach on the side. And it's something that, we don't really talk about, but I feel like why are we doing something on the side? Like
Mhm.
what that lights you up. And I know it lights me up too, because those students, and that's the other thing, like you can be kind of course you can't just be inappropriate with them, but you can be yourself with them because they want to connect to you on a different level. They don't want some old white lady in front of them. They want someone like that's thinking like them, right? So it's more on like on a plain level where you're like, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I'm ready to listen to you. So I feel like teaching is something, another passion that we have, and I feel like people should take a break once in a while and like search for what else do they want and not just be
Yeah.
stuck in their 9 to 5 all the time.
Yeah. So I have an interesting question for you
Mhm.
about this, and hopefully you're willing to answer. Um, so I know that in context of students wanting to connect um, with someone that's like-minded, or even if you think about you yourself and me, you know, because you know we're in similar parts of our early career and all that. I think what we really want, and we've talked about this before, is, well, we join a lot of events, we join a lot of you
Mhm.
know, career chats, these fireside chats, whatever, with senior executives and everything. and you already know where I'm going with this. Yeah,
Mhm.
the eye roll says it all. And so, you know, we have all these young people that are just so hopeful and so motivated and so determined, and so hungry for some kind of insight that's going to help them get to that same level. I mean, I think that's the idea, right? It's, you know, hey, this person is a senior executive. I would love to sit in your seat. You know, what did you do to get there? And
Mhm.
respectfully to everyone sitting in those seats, it feels on the receiving end, to me anyway, that we get a lot of the cookie cutter, here's what I'm supposed to say, kind of maybe superficial, not very transparent answers, where then we do the things that they say we're supposed to do, and somehow that's just not quite it. And so then, you know, there's something else that we're just not quite getting, and we don't know if it's because they're not allowed to say, or if there's just, if I don't know how to describe that, but I think you know what I mean, right? Like there's a gap there. And so when you interact with your students, I'm curious because the courses that you've taught are a lot more aligned with career, professional development, all of this. But I'm just math and physics and nerdy stuff. So we don't get to have these conversations really, but I'm curious to know, your students must also be hungry for that, like real talk, level with me, like what is it that I need to do to actually succeed or you know, move up in my career. Is there something that you've shared with them? Is there some kind of advice that you have given them or that you would give to them? Or in a nutshell, maybe another way of saying this is, what advice would you have given yourself, even in your short tenure of your career so far? Like, what is that missing piece, you know?
I think when you were talking about how there's a cookie cutter answer, I literally was going to just pull up like a book, and like these people are just doing like, oh, this is the answer is in this book. Like that's what they're doing. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm over it. And almost I can predict what they're gonna say next.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that because they have people take out time from their busy life. But I almost don't want to meet people anymore because it's like, if you're gonna say what you're gonna say, I can also like I just know what you're gonna say. So why am I wasting my 30 minutes talking to you? I think the one advice I would give myself and my students is that don't take that one person's opinion and solidify it in your mind. Like do your own research.
Right.
Lucky for us and our generation, we have a lot of good content creators out there that really give really good tips on
Right.
how to be more strategic in your work, your job search, for example, or
Right.
how to write a kick-ass email. Like Chat GPT is great. Like how do I write a kick-ass email to someone, right? So I think my biggest advice to anyone would be like, don't just, if one person tells you like you're not ready or whatever, like, and I used to do that a lot. I used to like overthink all these people that used to say no to me, and I used to take it
Yeah.
personally, and I would just be like, I give up, I'm done. And you know
Yeah.
this out of everyone that I used to, and at a certain point, I did give up. I was like, I'm done with this. I can't do this corporate culture anymore. I'm out, kind of thing. But then I'm like, no, I want to give myself one more chance. And I gave myself one more chance. I helped myself. Put your own oxygen mask. Don't rely on those people that you're doing 30-minute chat with. Yes, they might be helpful. There might be one good thing that you learn from the chat. But again, at the end of the day, it's your life. And I think you should do
Yeah.
the extra due diligence and find out
Yeah.
what's out there.
Yeah. No, I think that there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. And I think the way I see it is that I, I personally believe that there is, as long as people are being genuine,
Mhm.
there's a lot
Agree.
of value in hearing about their experience. 100%.
Yes, I agree.
However, I think that we need to take pieces from everything that we're hearing,
Mhm.
and every one of these chats that we're having, or every piece of advice maybe that people give us, you have to recognize, like you're saying, that these people are giving advice from their own position, right? And from their own perspective, right. Similar to how we are giving advice from our own perspective. Like I wouldn't expect anybody to try to copy exactly my career path or your career path, or fully agree with my experience or your experience, right? Because that's not the point. And I think that, again, I spoke about this in the podcast of why we want the things we want. The easiest path to figuring out what we want is to just copy and paste somebody else, because it worked for them, so it may work for me too. And I think a lot of people end up on that sort of line of thinking or that path, and they think, okay, and that for me anyway, personally, was what was the most disheartening when I first started at the bank, and I was wanting something totally different, a different part of the bank, same bank, but different part of the bank than what I was at the start. And when I asked people, how do I get there? They said, well, you have to spend 5 years in your current role, probably about 10 years in the next role, which only paid like 3,000 more, maybe a year or so. Then you got to spend another 12 years in leadership. Then you got to, and I'm like, I'm adding up all these years. I'm like, I'm going to be past retire. I'm going to be like in the grave by then. Like this can't be the way. Like the math just doesn't add up. Right. And so to me, it almost got to the point where I was like, there's absolutely no, like, there's got to be another way, right? This can't be my reality. I will wither away if I have to wait this long. And I didn't want to say that because respectfully, maybe that was somebody else's path, but that just wasn't going to work for me. Right. And so I think understanding ourselves, understanding that everybody's experience, we can take bits and pieces and create our own way. And we're more than welcome to try our own way, and maybe it will fail. I will admit, maybe my way is completely going to fail, and maybe I will end up spending 12 years in a role before. I mean, I don't know. I can't
don't see that happening.
I don't know. That's not my journey.
I will stop you.
Thank you. But you get the point, right? And so I think, there's definitely value in gathering this information, but it's only information, right? It doesn't, we don't have to internalize it as our truth necessarily.
But the problem is the information is not incorrect. Like their career journey is valid and it's great.
That's exactly right.
The advice is what the problem is. How come they all have the same advice? That's my question. Like where is this advice coming from, right? So I feel like more people should, I feel like there has been talk about authenticity in workplace before too, I'm sure. But how many people are actually practicing it, right? So I feel like the more you talk about it, the more people might be aware of what's going on.
I think it's a cycle that has to break for sure at some point. Or it has to kind of, we're part of the mechanism that's going to change that and mold that over time, I think. So, and there's no perfect answer either, but
I want to recognize you for that, because you did change that. You did you showed a different side that a lot of people were kind of shocked to see, like, whoa, that's possible, because we're shown like a linear path where we work, where you have to do, again, for a certain amount of time, and you have to take this straight line to this, do this, and then you can do that. But again, you showed the different way. And I think not just me, a lot of people in Southwestern Ontario in the market, like, recognize you for that, because that leap wasn't easy. So you took your own advice, you did your own research, you did everything out of box. And I think that's important. Everyone should do that. Don't just stick, what's that thing called? Like horses wear the goggles like this and they just focus on one thing. Don't do that. Take them off.
Yeah.
Look around. There's a lot more.
Yeah. Blinders, I think they're called.
Blinders,
yeah. Blinders.
Sorry,
I like horse goggles better. That's a lot better.
There's an Indian word that my dad uses, and I'm like, I don't think people will understand what I say.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, but you're right. And I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I don't know. The imposter syndrome part of me will say that it was just a lucky accident, and that they're
definitely hard.
Well, they're going to find out soon enough. I'm not going to finish that sentence because I'm fighting the imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's right. But what I did want to mention though, on that point, not that I want to get too far into that whole switch that I made, but especially for any women listening, I always say this whenever I'm the one in the seat, ironically enough, doing these career chats or whatever, talking about my path so far, is that I would have been the one that got in my own way of applying for what I would consider to be my big leap or my big switch in roles at the time. And women are actually more likely to not apply for a role over the smallest thing that they think might be a gap versus men. And I forget what that principle or thing is called, but essentially, in my case, I had, you know how there's like required things and then nice to have things. So I had all of the required things in the bag. Nice to have, I had like 9 out of 10. There was one thing, and it was like something along the lines of has used this website before. And I never went to that website before. So I was like, well, guess I shouldn't apply. And it sounds so ridiculous now, but we do that. And I literally would have been the only one to get in my way. And so anyway, that's a side note on getting in our own way of applying to things. But in any case, so I mean, we're gonna run out of time because we always have such great conversations and it's easy to run out of time. But
I think we should do a part 2.
Oh, part 2. That would be really good. I know. I feel like as we start talking about things, other things kind of emerge and you were thinking, oh, that would be nice to talk about. And that would be nice to talk about. Yeah, absolutely. So I just have one final question for you.
Sure.
Unless there's anything else that you want to share afterwards, so you can give that some thought. But
sure.
So I know that you volunteer as a mentor for newcomers to Canada, right? And who I think, from what I understand, it's for newcomers to Canada who are interested in working in your field specifically.
Correct.
And so I wanted to ask, first of all, why is that meaningful for you? I know you mentioned as part of your introduction that you're an immigrant to Canada, so I assume it has something to do with that, but I won't put words in your mouth. And then secondly, what kind of advice do you have to share with other newcomers or with your mentee that you had about starting work in general in Canada or in your field specifically? Is there anything you'd want to share around that? Because I know that's something you're passionate about.
Yeah. Actually, I hate to admit, but I feel like I learned more from her than like she learned from me. Of
course, you would say that.
No. And these professionals that come to Canada, they're seriously so experienced, and they have lived like 10 years before I even got into this industry, right? But what they require is not the professional side of how to do their job. They need someone to kind of guide them in like the small gaps that immigrants cannot fill. So I came as a teenager, so it was hard but easier to adapt to the culture and the language and everything like that. These people were kind of, they spoke different language, they did things differently, the legislation is different in their country, and now they have to learn everything. So it's about like different it's hard to explain, but it's basically like just guiding them one thing at a time, really. What kind of explain to them about what Canadian culture is like. And I think the reason I was interested in doing that is because I didn't have it. As a teenager, no one really, you're a teenager, no one takes you seriously, first of all. And kids are just mean. So I didn't have like a mentor or like someone that coached me how to speak a certain way or how to do things certain way. Even though I didn't need professional help, there's certain little things that you need. Like try moving a country, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's seriously very hard. And now they're doing it without their spouse, family, everything. They're just all by themselves. So I think it's more like mentorship, partnership, whatever you want to call it. So there's like 6 months of it's just like, I would like WhatsApp her, like, hey, how's it going? I know it's not our mentoring date, but what's going on? Do you need to talk? Do you need like extra help? So we kind of connected on like a friend level too. So which really helps. I think it's a, like overall help. It's not just like, hey, write your resume like this and you must use certain buzzwords. It's not like that at all. But they did have like a pillars that you should cover with your mentee. which
Right.
obviously I did, but I wanted kind of more. So
Mhm.
it was great. Like I feel like I paid it forward because I didn't have that, and I'm still in touch with her. So it's I applied for it again, so I'm hoping I get in so I can keep doing it actually. But yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. So I have to ask, because you
Mhm.
sort of put it this way, how would you describe Canadian culture?
Oh God. Um.
I'm very curious. It's a safe
Okay.
space.
I don't, and I hope people that are listening, please don't take it the wrong way. I live with a Canadian. I married a Canadian, and I love Canadians. Like I now when if you ask me what are you, I call myself a Canadian, but I think I'm a more
Ah,
Canadian than an
that's
Indian.
so
Like it's
cute.
really hard to explain
Yeah.
identity crisis. But I would explain Canadian culture. I would say a very accepting. Like of course, high school is a different story, but in general, very accepting. Like people understand that you're an immigrant and you're a newcomer and you need extra help. And I feel like our government has done a great job, like putting those resources into place. Like this program, the mentorship was with, like that's
Mhm.
just geared towards the newcomers, like which I don't think it used to exist like 20 years ago when I moved. So it's pretty cool. I feel like the culture is great where they're so open-minded and they're so
Mm,
welcoming. So now it's like, yeah, please come on over and why don't you help? Why don't you teach us something? I
right.
would say that's how that's how I see it.
Interesting. Is there anything that you warn them about that's different?
Um, huh, I don't know.
That
Yeah,
means
no,
yes.
okay. I
There must
no, this
be.
is a very positive thing. I actually
Uh-huh.
warn them about one thing. I tell them actually not about Canadian culture. I tell them to get away from their own culture for a little bit,
Oh,
mix with the
okay.
Canadian culture, because that's the only way to learn a
Uh,
language, a culture. Like
yeah.
because once
Just
you're just in
immerse
a
yourself.
yeah, because the
Mm,
problem is they always stick with their own groups, and I tell this to my students because they just come in the same group over and over. And I'm like, what exactly are you learning from your friends,
right.
right? So I think
Yeah.
my advice is kind of opposite of like get away from the group you came with, not like
Right.
disconnect with them
Permanently. Yeah,
completely,
yeah.
yeah, like say peace out, but
Yeah,
like meet new people, like meet people from the culture. Like you're in this country, you want to live here permanently, so now you need to learn what the culture is.
for sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, I've never immigrated myself, so I can't speak
Mhm.
firsthand, but I would assume that it's probably the the toughest but most effective thing to do to learn and accustom yourself to a new culture is to just sort of throw yourself into it, right? And leave yourself no other option other than to figure it out in a sense, right? Because we maybe use these connections with our, folks that are maybe from our home country or from our culture as almost like a safety security blanket, which is very helpful and necessary to some degree, right? Because you don't want to feel like it's too traumatic to go from 0 to 100. But eventually, if you are going to take on a new country as your home, right? There are certain things that you're going to have to learn. And so kind of immersing yourself in it here and there is probably helpful.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
I
Very
agree.
good.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it before we do our part two another day.
Yes, please.
I am so grateful that you joined for today's conversation.
Thank you.
Honestly, it went in ways that I didn't expect. And I think that's A, very typical of us, and B, I
Yes.
couldn't have hoped for more. So thank you to anybody who's listened this far. We always appreciate your time and attention. Feel free to share this episode with somebody that you think might benefit from listening to it. Thank you, Shivani, once again for joining us, and we'll see everybody on our next episode. Thanks
Thank you
very
so much,
much.
Gabby,
Take
for having me.
care. Of course. Take care. Bye.